Hey guys, Martin here, bringing another Dragon Ball Z Dokkan battle video, and so today we are going to do the anniversary part 2 LR tier list. Obviously we've had 3 new LRs release with part 2. We've had some easy A's and some super easy A's and all that kind of stuff, so of course the list is going to change, and it's interesting looking back at previous, because I always bring up my previous list, and it's interesting to see how my opinions have changed even about units that were out previously, and sometimes they swap places. I always say in these lists, right, that units who are next to each other could easily be swapped, and sometimes that happens from list to list. But of course, with this celebration, with so many new LRs being released, of course the list is going to have changed quite drastically, and it's interesting to think how many of the LRs we have that are near the bottom of this list, or at least in the bottom half, that when they came out and we did a tier list right after their celebration, they were at the very top, or at least in the top 3. But I think that's just a good sign of like how good the new units are, right? The worst case scenario is like we have a big celebration and a bunch of units come out and the top like 5 doesn't change at all. It'd be kind of disappointing for the most part, I think. So either way, we're going to jump in. Now, I've done a bit of a different thing with this list where I say it all the time and people don't take a lot of notice sometimes in the comments when I see people's responses, but I've tried to do something different with the actual list that I'm going to show at the very end, where I've made the tiers, even though it's still a 1 to 10 list, which admittedly is difficult to do. I know some people do the list where it's just like Z, A, B, C, so on and so forth, but I'm still sticking to the 1 to 10 format, which admittedly is kind of difficult because some of these units are so close. So I've tried to make some of the tiers the same color, just to really reinforce the idea that whilst I have tried to put these guys in a 1 to 10 order, if the color is the same, I feel like you could switch them around in pretty much any order that you want, right, within those. They're a lot of them are in like groups of 3 or 2, and if you want to swap them around like in the same color, I don't really see much of an issue with that. That's the thing, this top 10 is so close that a lot of these units, even within like the top 5, you could probably switch around in different ways and make arguments for all of those placements, right? So we're going to go ahead and jump in. As I always say with these tier lists, right, all of this is just my opinion based on my own experience with playing the game and playing with the units. If your experiences differ and maybe sometimes units perform really well for you, or you get really good RNG, or the opposite and they're really bad and you get bad RNG, then of course you may disagree. But do let me know down below in the comments, and if you do disagree with any of the placements, let me know why you think that my placements are wrong or bad or trash or whatever it is. Let me know why. I don't bother responding to comments anymore of people just saying that they don't like the list, or like, I can't believe this guy's at number 2 or whatever. It's like, tell me why and let's discuss it in the comments. But we're going to jump in and we're going to talk about 3 units straight away who technically aren't actually in the top 10. I kind of gave them a tier at the bottom of the list for honorable mentions, and the first one is the physical trio. Now it's very interesting, like, for them to not be in the top 10 anymore, for me anyway. I'm sure some people would have them in the top 10. I should stress as well that for this list, we're not only taking into account what the units are doing, but also how well they're performing in the current meta with the new content that we have. And whilst I'm not going to base my opinion on the units entirely around that event, the formidable foes thing being like the new toughest event, right, with how crazy some of these bosses can hit from turn 1, that has definitely influenced my thinking a little bit, because like I tried these guys team against the stage 6 of the formidable foes thing, and the trio just get absolutely crushed in slot 1 by some of these bosses, which of course when they released, that was kind of their role for their team, right? They just sit in slot 1, provide a bunch of support. They're still really good. If we get one of the new units come out that gives them like a 220 lead, and obviously they can meet their condition, because of course they need to have a movie heroes or all-out struggle character really with them for them to actually be as good, like to, reach their full performance. If we get a 220 leader come out that they can go on that team, they probably still very much have a place as like a floating support unit. And of course, if you do get the standby into the Goku, as long as you get the orbs and everything, like, they can still be basically invincible even in slot 1, which is really good, but it is only for that turn. So I still think they're very good, but especially with some of the new content, they don't quite make the cut. And then we've got like physical Janemba, who's still really, really good. His rage mode is super useful as like a team protection ability. He's on a bunch of good teams. Some of the teams that he's on, like we got the super easy A Int Janemba, who obviously we don't take into account for this list because it's just LRs. The Gohan, some of these units that go on the same team. I feel like physical Janemba still earns a spot on those teams for the tougher events, especially with if there's bosses that have Ki Blast supers, because he can negate those. So this guy is still really, really good. You could probably argue that he should be in the top 10 when we go over the units who are right at the bottom of the list, and I could probably see arguments for that for sure. I still really do love the physical LR Janemba, but he at least makes it into the honourable mentions tier. These are essentially all characters that you could argue should have been at number 10, or maybe even 9, depending on what you think about the bottom 2 placements on my list. And the last one is AGLUI Goku. Because this guy, he's going to age really well, right? Because with these shorter events, he just 100% dodges on turn 1, which is really good. But then, like, even earlier today on stream, we used him in a run. And on the second turn, he didn't dodge a normal and took, like, 300k. So, very annoying when that happens, especially considering that he has a base chance to dodge of 77%. So when that 23% kicks in and he doesn't dodge, especially because like if he dodged the first attack, you immediately go up to having an 84% chance to dodge. And then usually from that point on, unless you get really unlucky, as long as you dodge the first hit of the turn, he usually then consistently dodges like everything else. But it's when you don't dodge that first attack of the turn, he can get caught out. But he's still aged very, very well. You could argue that he should be at 10, or at least, you know, scraping onto the list somewhere. But I just think it's more of a case of not that these units in the honourable mention tier are not good anymore or not top 10 worthy. It's literally just the fact that like the new units and the way the list is coming out now, all these units are so good that these guys just get kind of pushed off the very bottom just a little bit, right? So we'll move in with the official 10 placement on the list, and that is Family Kamehameha Gohan. Now this guy, it's interesting to think that like he was number 1 for a lot of people on release. For me, I had him in the top 3 for quite a while, and slowly but surely he's dropped down the list a little bit. And some of it's to do with the difficult content, some of it not so much. Like it's interesting that he can go on a lot of these teams. He links very well. The stun chance on super is quite nice for some of these new events like the Hardened Foes, where stunning is available in phase 1. I always kind of forget as well that he raises superclass allies defense by 50% on his 18 key, but he's not really a slot 1 unit in his base, right? So you don't get a huge benefit out of that usually, unless you're just running him in slot 2 and the slot 3 unit gets that little bit of extra defensive power. Now the reason why he's difficult to place is, even in some content, like again, if we go back to the Formidable Foes thing, because his standby mode is so good, you know, if you're going into the 2nd, 3rd or 4th fight and you're on low health already, you can just use his active skill or his standby straight away. The problem is, because he doesn't have any like orb changing or anything, the large amount of his defense comes from this 50% per key sphere obtained. So let's say you go into standby on the first turn you want to use it, you get a bunch of orbs, play through the next couple of turns, and then you get to his next appearance and the orb field is just absolutely terrible for that turn. He can be a huge liability, and of course you want to pick up as many orbs as possible in general anyway, so that you can charge up the Family Kamehameha. So this guy, he is in a tier with a couple of different characters of the same colour that we'll see at the end. And I do feel like you could make the argument for him to be at the very top of those characters within that same colour. But it all just depends. Like, it's very situational. Like, his standby can let you down if you can't get the orbs. His base form is good, but it's nothing like super, super crazy compared to what we're seeing with some of the characters now. I mean, he's very solid. Like, after supering, he's got good defense, he's got damage, he's got guard, so he's certainly solid in the right scenarios. Of course, you do have to have the right ally for him, which is not difficult because of the teams that he's on, but you also have to be making sure that you're running him on a team with mostly superclass characters. Otherwise he doesn't get this damage reduction in his standby and can get caught out, which isn't a huge issue for most of his teams, but it's something to bear in mind, right? Having a restriction of any kind makes you worse than a unit that doesn't have a restriction, right? Just in case, worst case scenario. But I still think Gohan is very, very good, and that's the side. Like, even at number 10, right, he's still an exceptional unit, but he's at number 10, and at number 9 we have the new Gohan. Now, Obviously, it's difficult to place because he's new. Like, I've used him a fair bit now, and I think he is very good. I think he's a bit underrated, which is funny to say with him being at number 9, but that's just how good everybody else is. He's in the same tier, right, with this Gohan, Family Kamehameha. So if you wanted to swap them, I could see the arguments for it. Like, but this guy's really, really good. His restrictions, like the Family Kamehameha Gohan, are really easy to get, right? Full power or Android / Cell Saga, you're pretty much always going to have on the team with him, especially considering who some of his best link partners are and stuff like that. And then to get his active skill, one of the conditions is a Kamehameha ally, or when facing one enemy. I mean, to be fair, once you get to turn 5, depending on the event, chances are this condition's really easy to meet anyway. The enemy's HP 89% or less. So the condition for his thing isn't too bad, but realistically you're going to be running him with a Kamehameha ally anyway, and they only have to be on the team. So if you're running his team, you already have that anyway because you've got the friend Gohan. Same for the intro, but even throwing him on other teams, it's very, very easy to get his conditions. But I think he's really good. Like I say, I think he's a bit underrated. He's really good after supering. Like, his defense is solid. He's got guard. 20% damage reduction isn't a huge amount, which I guess is one of the reasons why people maybe downplay him a little bit. Like, he will die to some of the bigger super attacks, but it also depends, right? Because if he gets his additionals off, each of his supers are raising his defense. He has the guard, he has the little bit of damage reduction. He's obviously very, very good. He gets defense when receiving an attack, so I guess you can't see necessarily just from looking at him in the menu how good his defense actually is sometimes. And then, of course, his big thing, which makes him not so great for the hardened foes, but for every other of the events that are that little bit longer, is starting from the 5th turn, he gets a lot of extra defense when attacking as well as the higher attack stats. His biggest downfall is that he doesn't have any built-in additional from turn 5. Like, after his intro runs out, he's then getting this extra buff, so he's doing like a really big attack stat. I've seen even my 55% one with support on the rotation, not like crazy unrealistic, like over the top support that you wouldn't run in a tough event. Seen him get like, you know, almost up to like 50 mil, but then he does that one attack and then that's it, right? With, if you have him at 55%. So with dupes and obviously giving him a bit of additional, he can certainly put out a decent bit of damage for sure. And of course the Family Kamehameha, this doesn't play into where he would rank in the list, but absolutely awesome animation. And then, yeah, does some decent damage, gives him the full key and extra attack, so he hits really hard on that turn. I think, to be fair, that's probably the turn where he got the 50 mil, because it was the active skill turn, gets the extra 58% attack. But definitely a very solid unit, but he's in at number 9. Then at number 8, we have Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks. Because I think when you think about him compared to the new Gohan, like, he can slot 1 in a lot of situations, and especially if the enemy super attacks straight away and he gets his proc to get the extra 777% defense, he then has that activated, so any other following attacks are also going to do no damage to him. His biggest weakness is, especially in like the new event, like if enemies are hitting really hard, before he supers, he will actually take a decent bit of damage, so it's difficult for him to slot 1 unless he's going to get hit by the super and get the proc. If the enemy has a Ki Blast super, then he is basically invincible in slot 1, whilst he still has this extra damage reduction for the 5 turns. And then, to be fair, even when that runs out, he still has 77% damage reduction against the Ki Blast super, so that works out really nicely. And of course, getting hit with the Ki Blast super does no damage to him, but will still also have the chance to proc that extra defense, which lets him tank normals from even harder enemies very, very well if he's been supered first. But yeah, his only weakness now really is with these harder hitting enemies, it's more difficult for him to go slot 1, as he will take damage from normal attacks. But after he's attacked, then, you know, he's in a really good spot, super tanky, does lots of damage, very easy to get key because of the extra bonus that he makes his own rainbow orbs and gets extra key per key sphere. So it's very often that you just get the 24 key for him, which means guaranteed crit and a guaranteed additional super. So he's still very, very good. And again, like, he's a situational sort of character because against a boss with a Ki Blast super, like I say, you could easily put him much higher on the list. If we were making a tier list for like a certain event, certain events I could say he could be quite a bit higher, and then other events, right, where he's not going to counter or he's going to have like type disadvantage, then you might argue that he could be lower than either of the two Gohans. But I feel like he's definitely above both of them at least. So he's in at number 8, and then number 7 another Tech LR fusion. We have the Goku and Vegeta that fuse into Gogeta. Now this guy, a lot of people still think that Gogeta is really, really high up. Obviously, I don't think many people would say he's number one now with all the new anniversary LRs. But my big thing is the fact that obviously, as I've talked about in the past with units like Tech UI Goku, he doesn't start off as Gogeta. He starts off as these guys. And these guys are really good. I just don't think that in this base for the first couple of turns, they're better than some of the units that are above them on the list. They are still very solid. I mean, we have them here at number 7, but this is that separate tier, right? The 7, 8, 9 and 10. So these guys, I think, are all in a similar sort of tier where you could move them around. I think these guys should be at the top because of how good Gogeta is and the fact that even as Goku and Vegeta, they are very solid. But like, Gotenks is probably better than Goku and Vegeta. You could probably argue that this Gohan is better than Goku and Vegeta as well. Maybe even this guy. But obviously once they become Gogeta, they're better than all of those units for sure. And potentially even better than some of the units that are above them on the list. But then obviously the units above them on the list are really, really good as well. So number 7 you might think is low for Tech Gogeta, but it's more so because you don't start out as Tech Gogeta. Looking at the units who are above him on the list, I would probably put him... I mean, he would definitely be top 5. Would he be top 3 if he started as Gogeta? Maybe not, maybe 4. I don't know, we'll see. You let me know what you guys think when we see who the upper placements are. But currently we have him at number 7, which is crazy to think because he is so good. But it's just that the other units, I think, are slightly better for various reasons, which we will, of course, go into. So then we move on to number 6, and at number 6 we have Int Broly. Now I finally have my own Int Broly, so I can experience just how good he is and his team is for myself, rather than just using him as a friend. And obviously having 2 of them makes a huge difference, because you can activate the domain straight away, and you know that like when it runs out you can activate the friend one, and then obviously you have the domain active for a lot longer. When the domain is active, obviously this guy is much better. Having the guard makes him super tanky. His leader skill is really good. Like uncontrollable power, revenge, or planetary destruction makes for a much better array of team options than just movie bosses, because I used to just have the Tech Broly. So I'd have to run this guy as a friend, but the Tech Broly only gives his leader skill to movie bosses. But yeah, this guy really good. Gives Extreme Allies support for a few turns, which is nice. Has the damage reduction, gets the extra key. I always forget as well, he recovers 2% HP per key sphere obtained, which isn't a crazy amount, but it's a nice little extra bonus. But yeah, once you have the domain up, you have the guard, you have orb changing, attacks are effective against all types as well. So like, having 2 of him and having his domain up for, is it 6 turns it activates for? Yeah, because it's 3 turns, so it'll be 6 turns with the friend as well. Yeah, he's really good in his domain. With the domain up, especially after supering, he doesn't really take any damage. He can slot 1 with the domain up. Harder hitting bosses will do some damage to him, but not like crazy amounts, so he doesn't get 1 shot. So he's really good. And you could argue him being a little bit higher. He's the first unit, like these next couple of units I put in the same tier, the 6, 5 and 4. So let me know how you would order them, because Int Broly is very good. He's, with his leader skill, the utility with the support and the domain, I think he's just an exceptional unit. I don't know if people do still underrate him, but like his team's really good for the new difficult event. Every time I say the new difficult event, I'm talking about the formidable, is it hardened battle against formidable foes, or the other way around? I just keep saying the new event because the name for it's so long. But his team's really good for that. So above him at number 5, we have Super Saiyan 3 Goku. Now, this guy, you could argue, is maybe higher than the next unit, but I found it difficult to place these 3 units. That's why they're all in the same tier, because they all do different things. So like Goku, you can't really slot 1 him as Super Saiyan 3 unless you just want to take the chance that the dodge goes. I mean, it's 70% chance to dodge, to be fair, but he is dodge or die if you put him in slot 1. But he's very good. Even as the Super Saiyan 3, he's very good, right? He gets a ton of extra stats if you pick up all the orbs, and he does create... He does get a ton of extra orbs, a ton of extra key, I should say, from AGL orbs. And for every 3 key, he gets these extra stats. Very easy to get, especially because he gets extra key per non-AGL as well. He's providing Power Beyond Super Saiyan allies with 50% defense, which is obviously very, very good. He has guard, so if he doesn't dodge, he still tanks relatively well, as long as he's super attacked first, right? He greatly raises on both of his super attacks. He doesn't have any additional in his kit, right? So you're not like you're getting multiple supers guaranteed. So he is still sort of relying on the 70% dodge. But the reason why he's so high on the list, and one of the reasons why he's so good, is you've got the Giant Ape active skill, which can either be used turn 5 or when HP is 70% or less. So if you take a big hit on turn 1 and then he comes in turn 2, you can just use his active skill straight away. And in certain situations, it's very beneficial to do that, right? When you transform into the Great Ape, we obviously have the utility of the fact you can use it to cancel out super attacks and stuff like that. So in the new difficult event, like, that's really good because they're hitting hard straight from the beginning. In some of the longer events, you might want to save it until a little bit later if you can. But obviously the benefit of trading off getting that turn with the nullifications and everything, just cancelling out enemy abilities, is that you then straight away transform into Super Saiyan 4 Goku, and Super Saiyan 4 Goku is very, very good. Again, not really a unit that can slot 1, but after supering, he's got really, really good defense. He has guard. He provides Power Beyond Super Saiyan allies or Giant Ape Power allies 70% defense and 10% damage reduction, which is really, really good. Power Beyond Super Saiyan, of course, is full of really great units. It's funny considering the anniversary, of course, has the two main headliners, Vegito and Gogeta, are not on Power Beyond Super Saiyan. Because otherwise this guy would probably end up just as like a must-run unit on both of their teams. I mean, he still is very, very good to run on both their teams, but he's not giving them this support. However, he does give them this support, where his 18 key super raises all allies' attack and defense 44% for 2 turns. So that allows you to throw him on any team, even if you don't have the Power Beyond Super Saiyan or Giant 8 power allies for him to support with his passive, because he's still supporting everybody with his super. So you could use him as a floating support unit if you really wanted to. He's doing a decent bit of damage, he'll survive in slot 3, and then everybody on the next rotation is getting this massive buff. And he gets guaranteed crits for a couple of turns when he comes out. He gets a bunch of stats. 24 key gets an extra super. He recovers HP. This is another really undersold part of his kit, right? Is that 44% or less HP at the start of the turn, you heal 44%. And it's just an infinite number of times. So if you keep taking a big hit on the turn before he comes in, you're then getting that big heal. That's obviously very, very good. And then after he gets hit or has attacked like 5 times, he just has guaranteed crits anyway. So Goku is exceptional. You could argue that he is above even the next unit, but I put these 3 in the same tier because they're all just very, very good. They're all basically like must runs for their teams, or like lead the team specifically. But at number 4, we have Tech Broly. Now, Tech Broly, I think, is probably the most valuable extreme unit to have in your box at the moment, because he can be run on teams like even the anniversary Vegito and Gogeta. He can be run on their teams because he's a pure Saiyan, and he doesn't need to be run with extreme class units. He gives extreme class allies a buff on turn 1, which I think is a lot of things people forget about this sometimes, but that's really, really good for the starting off in tough events. He basically is invincible even in slot 1 in difficult events. And then, you know, you can just transform straight away in some situations if you want to. If the event is shorter and maybe there's like no attacks in slot 1, so his extra tanking isn't really necessary, you can just transform him straight away, because he still has big damage reduction for 3 turns. Then on his next turn straight away, you get to use the active skill, which gives him a massive buff. He does the AoE, and you know, that can be useful for some events. If you're getting the full 24 key with him, he does an action break as well, which is actually really useful. As the first attacker in the turn, obviously he has guard and extra defense before attacking, so you can still use him as a slot 1 tank after he transforms, or depending on the rotation, depending on the team that he's on, if you throw him in slot 2 or 3, he gets a guaranteed additional super. So he can put out quite a decent bit of damage whilst also being a very, very strong defensive unit. So you can argue like Goku will put out much bigger attack stats, is getting those crits consistently and supports allies on the next turn with his active skill, but Broly is like just a go-to tank, especially for the difficult event. Like any team that he's on, you can just kind of throw him on to be the slot 1, and he's going to work really well. Longer events, obviously, once you've transformed and these 3 turns have run out and he loses this extra damage reduction, he can definitely get caught still in slot 1 by super attacks, but usually I haven't really experienced him dying from full health to those kind of supers. I've seen him taking like 4, even 500k in slot 1 from some of these hardest hitting bosses, but that's still not enough to kill you. And then usually on the team setup, everybody else, once they've supered, are tanking attacks relatively well, usually for double digits, unless the boss has one of those like greatly raises attack on super effects. So you don't die, and then you can potentially recover from the next turn onwards. So Tech Broly is a super valuable unit. You could argue him being in the top 3, depending on your thoughts on the next unit, but I think the top 3 are so good. I put these 3 in their own coloured tier, which means if you want to switch any of those 3 in any order, I would potentially agree. Although, to be fair, I say that, but I don't think there are really many arguments for Int Broly being better than Tech Broly. The only thing is his leader skill, I would say, is better, but Tech Broly is probably better for everything else. But let me know what you guys think, and then we can get into the top 3. I don't think the top 3 will surprise anyone. I mean, I've talked about it a lot on streams and stuff recently. You know, with the way my previous tier list has only really changed by adding in one of the new characters, right? So at number 3, we have Beast. A lot of people, I've seen people make arguments that Beast is still number 1 over the 2 new anniversary fusions. And the main reason for that is the fact that he can slot 1 on turn 1, which they can't, which is a strong selling point. Like, Beast Gohan is still very, very good. I finally got duped for him with this anniversary with these banners, and he's still a very impressive unit now. And one of the things I really like about him, you guys know if you saw those runs, I used him for a lot of the runs in the new content stages, because he not only can he slot 1 on turn 1, you get his active skill condition by him just receiving a single attack. So then you get to his next turn, which, you know, if he's on turn 1, his next appearance is turn 3. A lot of these fights in the new event are literally only lasting for like 4 turns. So he comes back on turn 3, you go ahead and fire off his active skill, and then all of the attacks on the turn are being targeted at him, which gives him the buffs before he attacks. Nobody else on the rotation has to worry about taking damage, and then you end up winning on like the next turn. So this guy has always been very highly valued because of the team protection ability, and I think now, especially with the new difficult event, like that is like still just as valuable, even more so, because of how good it is, right? And he does get a bit weaker as the event goes on. Obviously he loses 40% damage reduction after 5 turns, which is a considerable amount. But I mean, even after 5 turns, if you're using the active skill, then he can still tank relatively well pre-super. But for these new shorter events that are very difficult, he's still very, very good. And that's the thing, right? When it comes to people saying that he's still number 1 over the new anniversary units, it really does depend, because they are very like sort of opposite ends of the design, right? This guy is very strong defensively from turn 1, has the team protection ability that you can use basically from the next turn onwards. Doesn't hit crazy hard, but is just a very solid unit and an anchor for the team. Whereas the fusions obviously don't start off as strong, and then they get to the point where they fuse and become absolutely insane, right? So this is where we get to the top 2. I mean, it's already obvious who they are, right? But which order did I put them in? Do you agree they should be this way around? Number 2, we have the Vegeta, or, you know, Gogeta. And then at number 1, we have the Goku, aka the Tech Vegito. So these two are very, very close. They are very good, right? I think they are just the 2 best units in the game. But having to make a differentiation between number 1 and number 2, I think Vegito is number 1 for 2 major reasons. And one of them is I think his leader skill is a lot better. Earth Protecting Heroes plus Earthbred Fighters gives you basically almost every Goku, Gohan, you know, a lot of these other characters, whereas the Successors and then plus Gifted Warriors is not giving you anywhere near as many top tier characters on the team as the other leader skill. And then the other thing is Gogeta, he has a lot of interesting utility. Like the fact that he is immune to status effects is really cool. 2 additional supers that are guaranteed crits, obviously very good. His active skill is crazy and buffs the entire rotation, which is really, really good. Like, he has a lot of extra utility for providing for the rest of the team to boost them that Vegito doesn't. But much like Beast, and one of the reasons why people have valued Beast for so long, Vegito has the team protection ability with his active skill being a target ability. And then, of course, the big thing is that he can massively out damage Gogeta on that turn with the active skill, because his counters just do such insane damage. And with some of these new bosses in the red zone and the new event attacking, some of them can attack up to 12 times, and only one of them is going to be a super. So on Vegito's active skill turn, that means he's doing 11 counters, and every time he gets hit, he gets a higher attack stat. So every counter is doing more damage. Then he does his own super attack, which greatly raises attack and defense in one turn. So obviously his counters do even more damage after he's attacked. So there are very few situations where Gogeta can actually out damage Vegito in one turn. And on the active skill turn, I think he just literally can't, right? Which doesn't matter. That doesn't automatically make Vegito better. But I think it's so close between those two that any little things we can say to push one to the #1 spot and the other one to #2. And like I say, for Gogeta, the arguments for him being #1 is the immunity to status effects is really, really good. And then his active skill buffing everybody else on the turn is super useful as well. But of course, that won't stop, like, if your slot 3 unit, who maybe is a support or someone who's not as strong defensively, is then getting hit by the big boss super attack, that extra 54% defense isn't going to be the difference between them surviving, depending on which, who it is and which boss it is. But yeah, Gogeta is still absolutely fantastic. And of course, the rotation of them together is ridiculous. They're both on each other's full leader skill. And the turn where you use Gogeta's active skill first to do damage and buff everybody, and then use Vegito's active skill to make him then get hit repeatedly, do all the counters, while Gogeta's already, got off a couple of the final flash. Like, the rotation of them together is absolutely insane. So these two are the best 2 units in the game, in my opinion. I wouldn't say Vegito is absolutely, oh yeah, he's #1 clearly, but I do think that the arguments for him being #1 are stronger than the arguments for Gogeta. Gogeta is still a very close #2. And then obviously, as I say, for Beast, because he can be that guy on turn 1 in slot 1, whereas these guys can't. That does make a big difference for Beast Gohan. But of course, even the events we have currently that do have rotation locking, for example, none of them are doing that on turn 1. So it's not like, this guy's going to get locked in slot 1 on turn 1 and get you killed. But yeah, the Gogeta, we didn't talk about it really much, but the Goku and Vegeta of each part of the card, their performance is still very good. But yeah, they're not slot 1. Once you switch over, and I guess it depends how you want to use them. This guy, of course, you got to remember the utility for Goku's active skill. It's one of those things where you really want to see Gogeta because he's super cool and super powerful. But in certain events, you could almost guarantee that you're going to win by using Goku's active skill instead, because you get a Ghost Usher for the 1 turn, and then on the next turn, you have guaranteed dodge for this unit, which is obviously still really, really strong. So certain events, you could pretty much just guarantee that you're going to win if you want to use that ability, because it is available the turn before you can then fuse into Gogeta. So depending on the event and how long it is, especially for the new event where we've said a lot of these fights only go for 4 turns and you don't actually get to see Gogeta or Vegito, those secondary abilities they have are very, very useful. And especially this Vegeta one, the Patara Crush, and him getting the permanent buff, I think is really underrated and makes him really, really good. So yeah, there you go. Those two are #1 and #2. So if we switch over to the list here and go to the slightly more zoomed out version, obviously you can see the honorable mention tier at the bottom, where we have the physical trio, AGL UI Goku and physical Janemba. But then going in reverse order, the top 10, Family Kamehameha Gohan at #10, the new Super Saiyan 2 Gohan at #9, Tech Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks at 8 and Tech Gogeta at 7. Int Broly at 6. AGL Super Saiyan 3 to Super Saiyan 4 Goku at 5. Tech Broly at 4. Beast at 3. Gogeta at 2. And Vegito at 1. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Like I said at the beginning, like I say in every one of these lists, if you disagree, do let me know why you think so. But as I said, with the different coloured tiers, I feel like you can switch units around in that tier and there would be arguments for it for every single one of them. I think, to be honest, you could even argue, depending how strongly you want to argue for Tech Gogeta once he becomes Gogeta, you could argue that he could be at 6, I think, maybe. But yeah, that's the list the way I see it right now in terms of 1 to 10. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. How would your personal 1 to 10 list look? Let me know down below. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Master Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the links down below, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.